From a highly secure network of top secret locations across North America, this is the Spurs Insider, another wait till next year edition. I'm your host, Mike Finger, joined as always by our panel of Express News Spurs beat writers Jeff McDonald and Tom Orsborn, along with sports editor Nick Talbot. Well, we had a half a season. We had more than half a season. We had through the All-Star break, well into the rodeo road trip, until it finally came to pass that we are once again talking about the local Cagers in terms of what they might be in the distant future. Because in the first game back from the rodeo road trip, when we were all convening in Austin, we find out that Victor Wembanyama, the centerpiece of the franchise, the face of the league, will be out for the rest of the season due to a blood clotting issue in his shoulder. This was stunning news for the franchise, stunning news for the league. The good news is it is something that the franchise believes will be able to be fixed, be addressed, will not affect Victor's health for the rest of his life or the rest of his career. Should be back for the start of next season. But Tom, who is joining us from his secure location in the Big Easy, wanted to check in with you first just to look back on the week as a whole, on how kind of the whole outlook changed this week, didn't it?
Yeah, we're back in, 2 seasons ago, kind of, with Victor gone. Like you said, Mike, it was stunning. But yeah, the good news is, he seems to be going to be okay. A little bit worried about that though, whether this is, could somehow be an ongoing thing. We're not, I'm hoping like heck it isn't, but you just never know. But yeah, we're right back, where they're playing without Victor, and it's just a weird vibe around the team. They carried on, of course, but still, it's just everyone's just trying to still wrap their heads around it, and the whole season, Pop, the stroke early in the season, now Victor, it's just been a weird season, to say the least.
And Jeff, because we like to be optimistic on this podcast, and that's why people tune in to this show every week. I know you're not a medical expert, but you've talked to medical experts, and there are a couple of ways when you're talking about blood clots, deep vein thrombosis, could be genetic, and that it could be one that recurs, and that's something that cost a really great player like Chris Bosh his career eventually, when he had to hang it up. But the optimistic part of this is that this seems to be possibly one of those issues that affect baseball pitchers, that have affected Brandon Ingram, an NBA player a couple of years ago, Alsar Thompson, where it can be addressed. It can be localized to one area where, like with a pitcher in the shoulder, where it's repetitive use, and you can take care of it and move on, right, Jeff?
Yeah, let's go over, like, this isn't unheard of in sports and even in the NBA. You mentioned the worst case scenario, which is Chris Bosh, and that was a thing where they couldn't keep his blood clots from recurring. Like, he had one, came back from it, had another one. One of them traveled to the lung, and like, that's just all bad news. And he had to retire. But you mentioned Brandon Ingram, you mentioned Azar Thompson, Christian Coloco is another one who's currently in the NBA. Those last three are examples of guys who have had blood clot issues and returned in relatively short order, like in a timetable that would have, if Victor followed the same, would be back for the start of next season, and returned to full health, full recovery. Didn't lose anything on the court. I talked to a couple of doctors after this, news broke. Obviously, these are guys that they're not Spurs doctors. They're not people who have
Examine
Victor or looked at his charts or anything, have no inside knowledge at all, but just what they would look for in a patient of this type. And what I've been told is, what if a blood clot in a healthy 21-year-old is, if it shows up, is almost always going to show up in the lower extremities and the legs. Victor's being in the shoulders really points to a high possibility. And I don't want to act like we know that Victor has this. We're not really sure, but I'm just saying in general, the first thought these doctors had when they hear it's in the shoulder is this thing called thoracic outlet syndrome, which is basically there's a blood vessel that gets sort of squeezed or compressed between your clavicle, your collarbone, and your rib, your first rib, and that creates clots. And like you mentioned, baseball pitchers, you see that a lot in baseball for whatever reason. And the cure or whatever, the fix is surgical. It's a surgical procedure. Basically, they remove a rib.
Remove a rib, or I believe you can shave down the clavicle too.
Yeah, one or the other. If you can picture it, like you have to do one or the other just to create to relieve that compression, that pressure in there. And that sounds like, oh God, Victor's going to have a rib. If Victor has to have a rib removed, that sounds awful. But actually, that would be a decent outcome, because if it is this thoracic outlet syndrome, you have a culprit, like what's causing it, and you know there's a proven way to address it and fix it and get him back on the court and have a really low likelihood of the blood clots coming back. Like the worst case scenario is we don't know what's causing these blood clots, and maybe we can fix them now with blood thinners and get them back on the court, but then they keep coming back because we have no way of knowing why they're forming in the first place. So I think if it turns out he has something that can be identified, and medical science already has a proven track record of correcting, I think that would be good news. What did I say?
Medical science. Yeah, no, that's a good kind of science.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, yeah, if they could do that, then that would be the most positive outcome. And I should point out the Spurs are not giving us a lot of details about all this. They probably already have a good idea of what's going on, more than they're letting on. But they are telling us, as you said at the top, that they're expecting that this will be something that they can handle. It's more like an episode that they can handle in the short term, and it won't affect the long term. They're not expecting this to be a long-term issue for Victor. So that might just offer some clues, if you want to connect some dots about what maybe they're seeing.
Without the Spurs providing a specific diagnosis, they are sort of releasing details that lead us to believe that everything that Jeff said is true. Like you can put the dots together and figure it out. And when they're adamant, this is not a Chris Bosh situation. They're adamant this is not something that they believe is a genetic situation. So you put all that together, and what you're left with is a timeline that should, like Jeff said, have him ready for, if not training camp next season, then the season. I think the Oscar Thompson one happened in March of last year. It was exactly a month later than, or approximately a month later on the NBA schedule than Victor's was. And Oscar was cleared to return the first week or two of November. So you move all that up a month, and Wembanyama on the same timeline would be first couple of weeks of October, which would maybe not have you ready for the start of training camp, but could have you pretty close. And if you have to miss a couple games, that's not the worst thing in the world. And if he has a rib removed, I have a distant, long ago relative who had a rib removed. I think all of us do. Way, and it worked out for him.
Did it though?
Oh.
Well, some of his descendants have not been great.
I mean, like his immediate descendants murdered each other.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Golly.
I forgot about that. And there's still descendants that are not the best. So, but maybe Victor's will work out better. Yeah. And I don't know. I'm not sure whether to go big picture or zoom in now, but I guess big picture, you're looking at another close to the season, like Tom said, sort of like 2 years ago, where they're the Spurs aren't going to be as bad as they were 2 years ago, but there are
They're losing. They're losing to the Pelicans.
They're losing to the Pelicans. They are in kind of what am I trying to say? Dual objectives here to improve on the court. You still have players that you want to get better with. De'Aaron Fox, Stephon Castle, Keldon Johnson, Jeremy Sohan, Devin Vassell. Like you want those guys to get better. You also have big prizes out there in the draft lottery, and the Spurs aren't going to end up with one of those top four odds. Like they're not going to have as many lottery ball combinations as they did 2 years ago, but they have theirs. They could have, I mean, they do have Atlanta's. Atlanta's could be in the top 10 somewhere. The Spurs could be in the top 10 somewhere. And this is a really, really good draft. So the Spurs just completely fold on Sunday in a game that Tom covered in New Orleans, in which the fourth quarter was just a kind of a disaster. Things fell apart, and you lose to one of the worst teams in the league, the worst team in the West, and that's discouraging. But in these next couple of months, there's always going to be sort of an upside, which is the draft stuff. And we're, like I said, we're back where we were before. I guess we know, we've talked to Mitch Johnson about this. We know the Spurs are going to continue to try to win. It's another one of those where the tank sort of happens naturally, though, right?
Yeah, they don't have to try to lose, as we saw the other night. I mean, they'll win a game here or there, some games here or there, but like, man, up 17 against the worst team in the West, and then to not only lose, but to lose by 18, like that flip is pretty rough. And like you were saying, you would feel really discouraged about it, but then you're just like, oh well, that helps you in the draft lottery. So, ho hum, hee. So.
It should be pointed out, I guess, that they lost to Charlotte with Victor.
Yeah.
At the start of this trip. So
also beat Phoenix without Victor in the first game back.
Yeah,
but Phoenix is just kind of a mess.
I think that's more on Phoenix than anything else.
And they were playing with so much emotion in that game, you know.
Yeah.
And Phoenix was clearly not. That was fun. I don't know. I'm changing the subject. It was fun at the Moody Center to be kind of down on the floor. Not kind of, but actually down on the floor. We're not usually there anymore. And just to hear like all the things that were going on and what people were saying. And like, it was, if you couldn't tell on TV or you couldn't tell from like the upper deck of Moody being like 5 feet from the floor, like those Phoenix guys
rubbing it in on the listeners that you have a better seat than them.
Those Phoenix guys are not having a good time. Like they're not connected to each other. You can just tell by looking at them, by hearing them speak to each other. That was kind of interesting to me. Not to change the subject, but whatever.
Another difference between now and 2 years ago is you're farther along in this new team that you built. You're farther along in the process, and you have guys, as opposed to 2 years ago, who you expect to be around when the team is winning again. And those are the names that I just mentioned. Like there's probably 4 or 5 of them that you hope are going to be integral pieces of the next contender. And so a difference that I see this time around, even though we are kind of talking about the draft and we are talking about a team that's not going to be competing for playoffs over the next couple months, you'd like to see some kind of not only progress, but progress in terms of playing with each other in De'Aaron Fox, in Stephon Castle, and like somebody who sticks out to me right now is Devin Vassell. Like Victor's gone now. You want a little more of a scoring load from players like this. What do we think about where Devin Vassell is right now? I'm not saying he's been terrible, but I think the hope the Spurs had was he would have been farther along than he is right now.
Like to address your broader point before we get to Devin specifically, like all that would be beneficial if the guys that are remaining can show you something. But it's also like with Victor gone, you're taking this huge center of gravity off the floor. Yeah. So like Devin Vassell's not going to get the same shots he would get if defenses are worried about Victor. De'Aaron Fox is not going to get the same kind of shot. So it's almost like you want to see something, but you're seeing something in a context that if all goes well, you're not going to see a lot going forward. So it's just interesting to see how that will play out. As far as Devin, yeah, he probably has not taken the leap forward this year that you would like in a perfect world. I think maybe that you can give him some passes on some stuff, like never having an off season. Like, again, surgery after surgery, did not have an off season, did not have a training camp. You talk about the guys that like work all summer on this skill or that skill. Devin couldn't do it because he was on the shelf with surgery. So maybe it shouldn't be surprising that he didn't take the big leap that you'd expect. But the fact of the matter is that he really hasn't. He's had his moments, but been really inconsistent with it. And I don't know if you can really expect him to carry you or up his game with Victor off the floor for the end of this season. Maybe you can. Maybe he just gets a lot more shots, but I think they're gonna be worse shots. So I don't know.
Mitch said something after the game, the New Orleans game, that I thought he said out loud something that I've thought for quite some time, that, as Mitch said, he thinks Devin cares too much, and the point.
I do not have that problem, by the way.
Yeah. The point being, he is very conscientious. He wants to do super well, especially after that huge contract. There's a pressing factor. I thought that about him for quite some time. And, Mitch said, I want him to keep shooting, want him to be super aggressive, but at some point, I just also want him to have that attitude of, I don't give a bleep, and just put it all away from him, all the outside noise, the what people say about him, what people think about him, the contract, everything else, and just go out there and get angry and be aggressive and do what he's capable of doing. I thought that was, like I said, I thought it's something I've thought for quite some time. That contract weighs on him in to a certain extent.
That said, it was a big contract at the time, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, maybe De'Aaron is now, but Devin might be the highest paid player on the team right now. But like as the CBA grows, that Vassell contract's not going to be all that big in a percentage of the salary cap. Like when all this gets put, yeah, with all this, when all this gets put, like we've probably seen enough of Vassell to think he's probably like a number 4 on a really good, like, playoff contending, championship contending team. Like, that's probably his ceiling now. Maybe he's the 4th best guy. And you've got Victor, you've got De'Aaron Fox. Maybe Stephon Castle becomes your number 3. Maybe it's somebody that comes in a future draft. Maybe it's someone who comes elsewhere. But if Vassell can slot in as a number 4 guy, which means he doesn't have to score 25 points a game. He just has to give you something consistently each night, like a Harrison Barnes kind of production. If you think of him in those terms, I think he can be fine. And also, I think by the time we get there, his contract he will be paid like a number 4. He'll probably be the 4th highest paid player on the team by that point. So maybe to tie all this together with a bow, maybe if he can just calm down and realize he doesn't have to be their second best player or their best player with Victor out, or a guy that scores 25 points a night, and can just live with those ebbs and flows, maybe just the whole thing will look better, and maybe everyone will feel better about it.
To transition to another Mitch Johnson aside that caught my attention this week. Mitch was talking about having De'Aaron Fox and Chris Paul, staggering them, making sure that one of them was always running the floor, that you have these 2 point guards. Mitch kind of on his own, unprompted, said that he considers Stephon Castle part of that group. And the reason that jumped out to me is that it sort of sheds some insight into why the Spurs might like having Stephon Castle coming off the bench for the last half of the season. It gives him more of an opportunity to hone that skill. Now, I don't think that they consider his long-term top position to be point guard. I think once he becomes what they want him to become, like he's playing alongside De'Aaron Fox as that wing defender, another creator out there from the 2 or 3 position, a guy who can guard a lot of positions. But I found that sort of fascinating, in that was Mitch saying it's still important to remember that Stephon Castle does have point guard skills and can initiate offense. And so I don't want to spend more time. We've spent enough on the Chris Paul thing and why he's still starting. But I think there are long-term, that's just a reminder that there are long-term reasons why they might be doing it this way, because that does give Stephon Castle more reps as an initiator. Also, Stephon Castle seems to be, I don't want to use hitting the wall because that can be a loaded term sometimes, but coming back from the break, it's understandable he didn't have the break that everybody else had. He's had a few rough games in a row, and maybe it's not the worst thing in the world to have him kind of battle through some of that, some of those tough spots and come off the bench and figure it out. I still think he's going to be awesome. I still think he's the front runner for a Rookie of the Year. Not that that matters a whole lot. He is the 2024-25 season has been a huge plus, a huge encouragement for the progress of Stephon Castle. And I think people worried about that. Oh, he's not getting enough minutes off the bench. He should be starting. I think there is definitely a plan for him long term, and people should be really encouraged by that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't have a whole lot to add, but I agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, coming out of the All-Star break, he was pretty busy in San Francisco, so a little bit of a dip here. But yeah, I mean, you can't have these knee-jerk reactions with him. You know, he's going to be pretty darn good, and if he has a dip here and there, well, that's part of being a rookie. And,
not to really compare the two, directly, but like the guy who won the unanimous Rookie of the Year last year also had a couple stinkers along the way as well.
Yeah,
it kind of happens.
It does, and he's got a good attitude about it. Walked out of the Moody with him one night, and after a rough night, he was upbeat. He's definitely not complaining about anything. He wants to be better. He wants to be great every night, which we know that players can't be, and especially rookies can't be. But I think he's going to be. I think that's one thing, if you're a Spurs fan, that you do not worry about the future of that guy, the future of that position. He's going to be really, really good.
Do we need to talk about the pop news that really wasn't all that newsy?
Well, sure. That's and we're going to do it without kind of crapping on anybody else. It's something that's been awkward all year. And if you go back and say, read the first column that I wrote 2 hours after the Spurs made the announcement about the stroke, if you read everything that Jeff and Tom have written since then, if you listen to every podcast that we've had since then, including the one where the Spurs put out the Greg Popovich statement about his progress. And I think if you go back and listen to that podcast, you'll remember that the charming host pointed out that even though Pop talked about coming back, we should not take that at face value that he's going to come back this year or ever come back. That it was encouraging that he's made the joke that he made in that statement. I think not to be too flippant about this, Greg Popovich, before he had a stroke, was the oldest person in history to coach an NBA game
by a lot.
Nobody had ever coached an NBA game at age 75. He's since turned 76. He had what was termed as a mild stroke. That's sort of a oxymoron. Like there's no such thing as a mild situation like that, especially when you're 75, 76 years old. I think it's great that he uses the thought of coaching again as something to shoot for. I think it's great that the Spurs continue to consider that a possibility. It would be great to have him back. But to say all along that it was likely that he would return this year, that it was say better than 50% that he would return ever, I'm not sure that we've ever given that indication on this podcast. I'm not sure we've ever, I know we have never written that. And so when we get into breaking news about the Spurs expectations, which is what the breaking news over the weekend was, that the expectation is no longer that he returns this year. Like, I'm not sure that ever truly was the Spurs expectation that Greg Popovich returns this year. That always was going to be kind of a best case scenario. And I guess now that it's a situation where people are talking about it more openly. Tom wrote about it this weekend about the Spurs kind of committing to play for Mitch the rest of the year. I don't think that was any kind of huge shift.
Yeah.
There was not a shift in the Spurs outlook on Pop this weekend. If anything, it's been sort of gradual acceptance of that over the past 3 months.
I think that as the longer this has gone on without, Pop being back in the building, it became clearer and clearer. Yeah, he's not going to come back this year. Like he's not going to show up for the last month of the season, the last week of the season. Like that doesn't make a lot of sense. And if he's not going to come back this season, then yes, of course, his long-term future is also unclear.
Right.
Which is what the news was this weekend.
Right.
And
again, we're not bashing anybody else. Like, you get that, you get that quote on the record. You can go with it. That's great. Yeah. But I don't think anybody here, and I don't think any of the listeners were shocked by that. I think most people who've been paying attention to this realize that it's a long road back for Pop. You start to wonder, is it worth it for somebody who's made as much money as he has, who has grandkids to enjoy? Like I wrote the day of the announcement, like there's all kinds of reasons why this is not something that you'd want to push, especially if it risks his health. So we're still wishing for the best for Pop. Hope it works out. Would love to have him do a press conference and question the sanity of our questions again. Like that'd be fun for old time's sake. But I don't think that that has ever been like a 90% certainty that or an expectation that we thought was definitely going to happen again.
Yeah,
So,
you look, after the All-Star break, that would have been a spot where he could have come back. I mean, you look at the schedule.
if you're going to do it,
yeah, there's no way to ease into this schedule. It is
No.
brutal the rest of the way.
Which is why 75 and 76-year-olds have never done it before.
Yeah,
Like it's we can all speak to this. I know, Tom, you can. It's a young man's game to be out there on the road covering this team, let alone like game planning and running huddles and stuff like that.
And none of us do every game. Right? Between us three.
Yeah.
The coach usually has to do every game.
Usually.
And speaking of young men, 38-year-old Mitch Johnson, it's not a case where Pop's looking at this thing and says, "Oh man, everything I built, everything I sweated for all these years is falling apart."
Mm-hmm.
It's carried on as if he was here.
And they're in contact.
Yeah, Mitch has handled everything really well. I'm not talking about X's and O's, but just keeping everything going and the program intact, the values and principles intact. He's done a great job with that. So why not finish the season with him?
They get along. There's respect.
Yeah.
And on that note, I think that it's worth. This has been sort of a serious podcast with serious issues that we've discussed, but I do think it's worth, because the people have been asking about this podcast.
You guys still hate each other?
In social media.
God.
the comments that Jeff is bringing to my attention on the various
Did you guys go to like couples
Players.
counseling in the last week? Get back on the same page?
I don't want you to make this into just two people. I think that the thought is, and if and please let me get through this, because I think it's worth. I don't want any interruptions here. I think it's worth a thoughtful explanation. There apparently are people out there who believe that I don't like my colleagues, and let me just tell you that I met Jeff McDonald as a freshman in college. We were freshmen in college nigh on 3 decades ago. I met Tom Orsborn was it a Cowboys minicamp in 1999, I believe, Tom?
No, Mike.
When you took me under your wing?
This is why we don't get along.
It was a long time ago, and I can't.
When you were in high school.
In high, you met me. You interviewed me in high school. That's right, Tom. And when I was a high school baseball player, you interviewed me for the San Antonio Spurs.
Story. I promise to use them.
So anyway, let me finish. Since then, we're talking about 3 decades of traveling the country to cities, dozens of cities across America, plane rides, car rides, shared dinners. We've shared hopes and dreams. I know these 2 guys' families, long nights in press boxes, in media workrooms, and it's just all this history we have with each other. And so for people, when people ask, do I not like these guys? Of course I don't like them. Like I'm sick of them. It's enough is enough. So there you go. That's the answer to your question. Do I like these guys? I've known them 30 years and they annoy the hell out of me.
Well, the feeling is mutual.
It's family.
Here's what I think. I think we maybe have some. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think we have younger. Maybe our demographic skews younger than us.
That can't be true.
I don't know, but I just know like the younger generations don't realize in the 90s this is what we did to each other. We just bust each other's chops.
Oh, that's true. Like I've noticed, if
you're not busting chops, then you don't even like that person. Like, what are we even doing?
One thing I have noticed about the younger, like the guys, the guys and girls and men and women that we cover in like Generation Z and whatnot, they like to hug and support each other and say nice things and it. That's just different, man. That was not the love language back in the day.
Exactly. The busting the chops it was the love language in the 1900s.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
I think y'all should we appreciate the concern. We appreciate the queries, the conspiracy theories about the Spurs Insider podcast, but I think it's fine.
And I guess I wanted to mention this, like one thing that might help you to bury the hatchet is I met up with a friend of mine from high school, from Madison High School. He lives in Austin now. We were up there in Austin.
Did he ever play in the NBA?
Did not. Well, that was a different guy. This is a different story. Okay. This is a guy called Mike Byers. He's a friend of mine.
Oh yeah.
He works at 512 Brewery there in Austin, and he's a big fan of the podcast as well, and sent us a care package. So when I see you guys again, I'll give you your part of the care package, and maybe you guys can tilt a pecan porter or an IPA and get back in the.
I've never tasted alcohol before.
In the good graces of each other,
if that works
if
out.
We're gonna get care packages. We got to be each other's throats more often. That's
true.
Yeah.
That's true, Tom. You always make great points. You're a good man. Who could dislike you? I know you have a shoot around to get to in the Big Easy this morning. Need to let you get on your way. I need to get Jeff get on his way. Until next time.
No quick predictions. No quick predictions.
Oh, I'm sorry. We'll do that. Good looking out, Tom. You're a good colleague.
I don't like the lovey-doveyness of this podcast now.
Well, the thing is that
you remember that the rule of Larry David's rule for writing Seinfeld: no hugging, no learning.
Yeah,
we're getting a little too close to hugging and learning right now.
It's all sarcastic. It's all sarcastic, and also, by the way, the predictions, Tom. If you want to keep with it, that's fine. I consider them less and less relevant in the current.
You got it.
scheme of things. They did not go 4-0. Jeff's prediction last week of 4-0 did not quite happen. I'll give him a pass because Victor Wembanyama wasn't available. I will say we will look forward. We're taping this before the Tuesday evening Pelicans rematch. And then there's a back-to-back in Houston tomorrow. Before we meet again, there will be a game at Memphis and a long-awaited return to the Frostbank Center against the Oklahoma City Thunder, the best team in the West. After New Orleans night, that's a tough 3 in a row.
That's going to get ugly.
I'm not sure anybody here would predict more than one win. If you don't win tonight against they're still the Hornets. They're not the Hornets anymore. That's how old I am. Against the Pelicans, it's going to be rough. But there's reasons to something can be learned from all this. Progress can be made. And until we see you next time, take care of each other. Keep it real.